Welcome to our podcast on organizational culture. Today I'm going to chat to you about a very, very topical issue that has become dominant over the last, probably the last 4 to 5 years, and that is creating psychologically safe organizational cultures. Now, I will spend a bit of time talking about organizational culture in general, but I do want to hone in on this area of psychological safety because it's become a really important aspect of organizational life. It's no longer okay for us as leaders in organizations to ignore the aspects of culture that are impacting people negatively. And that's key in a leadership role in today's world. A big part of your job is to lead the culture. And when we look at all the research, we do know that good, healthy organizational cultures do deliver better outcomes. That's not to say that an unhealthy organization can't still produce a profit. It just means that the profit is going to be lower and the outcomes are going to be less healthy for those that work in and around the organization. So let's get talking about organizational culture. Most of us have a view on what organizational culture is, and we would say things like the values of the organization, the way we do things around here, the nuances of who's allowed to do what and how the hierarchy fits in and how the structure impacts culture. So we know that there are a large number of things that impact culture. But in reality, when we start to hone in, particularly on creating psychologically safe organizational cultures, it is around the behaviors that are demonstrated in the organization. And our job as leaders is to lead those behaviors and make sure that the behaviors are impacting healthily on the people in the organization. So, what are those behaviors and where do we look for them and what are the things that we need to do? Well, first and foremost, in my view, what you measure is what you get. So if you're going to be effective in leading a culture and leading a healthy culture, you need to be doing a regular measurement of your organization's culture. And when we talk about measurement of culture, please be careful. This is not just around measuring the climate. The climate is, that surface stuff that we see. Do people have morning teas when it's someone's birthday? That's surface stuff. Yes, we want that to be right. But underlying all the surface stuff, we want the behaviors in our organization to be generating good outcomes for the organization and the people in the organization. So, for example, we might be good at having morning teas and enjoying each other's company, but we might, underneath the surface, have bickering and fighting going on that doesn't go above the line. Yeah, we want to actually fix the bickering and fighting, but maintain the good, healthy aspects. So when we talk about climate, it's not just those climatic things that make people feel engaged, but are people actually delivering what the organization requires of them? Are they accountable for the work they're required to do? Are they delivering what the strategy of the organization says they will deliver? Or are they going off at their own little tangent? So when we talk about organizational culture, it's all of those aspects. It's actually measuring whether people are doing what the organization requires of them, but also is there a healthy vibe around the culture? I often describe the organization culture as the vibe because you can feel it when you walk into an organization. You can feel that vibe. You can feel whether it's upbeat and positive or whether it's negative and unpleasant. And it's really palpable nowadays in organizations. You'll see it in the results of your labor turnover. We know that while the Great Resignation was a big moment where people were leaving organizations, the research still says that a large majority of those people moved on because of unhealthy organizational cultures. We also know that we still have a major problem in terms of culture. Globally, in organizations, we're still battling with sexism, racism, and all of those unhealthy aspects that underlie culture that isn't built for good psychological safety. So we do need to measure our culture. Now, if you look around, there's not a lot of tools that measure both climate and culture. Human synergistics certainly do with their OCI and OEI, but there are tools being developed as we speak around psychologically safe cultures. And so you need to find the tool that works for your organization. But measurement's the first thing that we need to do. Need to get a measure. Are we creating a healthy culture, or are we creating an unhealthy culture? So when we look at organizations that are successful in this space, they are regularly measuring culture. The other aspect that is key to organizational culture, and we can't go past it when we're talking about organizational culture, is the leadership. So if you look at the research, 50 to 70% of the variance in culture comes from our leaders. So if our leaders aren't leading the culture, we're going to hit some real challenges. And they need to be leading it authentically and driving the culture that they want in their organization, but doing that consciously and taking conscious strategies to lead the culture. Leaders have a double impact in terms of their impact into culture. The first impact they have is their direct impact through how they lead, the style of leadership that they bring. Are they transformational, or are they doing something else? And our leaders have a direct impact in that vein. So are they authentic in leading the culture? Are they actually delivering a healthy leadership style? Are they taking care of their resilience so that they actually don't get into a negative space and lead negatively? So our leaders are key in terms of culture, and that direct impact we can see. Yeah, in a culture where you've got leaders who are authentic in their leadership, you know that if you go to them, that you're going to get the answer that's truthful. If you've got leaders who are being divisive and unhealthy in their leadership, then you're going to see a very different style of leadership and a different culture. So our leaders are hugely important. So when we talk about measurement, we need to be measuring the organization's culture, but we also need to be measuring our leaders and their impact in the organization. So measuring their leadership is a fundamental strategy in terms of delivering a psychologically safe organizational culture. That's important when we start to look at if leaders are doing 360s, are they shifting and changing their behaviors? So I've had a 360 done. Have I actually shifted the behaviors that 360 has told me I need to shift? Now, again, there are multiple tools out there that measure people's leadership. There's lots of organizations providing 360 tools. Again, Human Synergistics provides a tool around leadership, the LSI, but Center for Creative Leadership also does leadership diagnostics. There are also emotional intelligence leadership tools, transformational leadership 360s from BAS. So there's a whole range of different tools you can use. Again, dependent on the style of the leadership group, dependent on the context of the leadership group, you want to choose the tool that's going to be most useful to you in your organization. But I would say that you need a leadership measurement tool that is going to help you to understand whether your leaders are delivering a psychologically safe workplace. Now, one of the key aspects of psychological safety is trust. So some sort of measurement in your tool around trust and trustworthiness is a healthy area to look at. So if your leaders are leading effectively, they will be building trust. They'll be actually developing their trustworthiness. And when we're measuring and doing a 360 measurement, we should be assessing whether they are building trust, because that's hugely important. If people are working in a trusting relationship with their leader, they're likely to be feeling psychologically safe. On the opposite side, if there's no psychological safety, there's probably also no trust. So when we look at leadership in the organizational setting, we want to make sure that our leaders are building trust. We see a lot of denigration of trust in organizations at the moment. And unfortunately, in the work I do, I go into organizations and I see that breach of trust happening. That's not a healthy place. Where we've got trust being eroded, then people are not going to speak up. They're not going to come and talk about what's bothering them. And it's going to create all sorts of unacceptable behaviors. And as Steve Simpson says, it's going to create unacceptable, unwritten ground rules that are allowed to bubble up. So we need to be measuring our leaders. So first and foremost, we need to measure the organization. Second, we need to measure our leaders. Key to our ability to build a psychologically safe workplace for the people that work in our organizations. So once we've done those two things and we're tracking both our organization's journey of cultural development and we're tracking our leaders' development in terms of their capacity to lead effectively, we're going to be on the journey of building a psychologically safe space. Now, let's talk about what are some of those key aspects we now want to build into our organization on a daily, weekly basis that are going to help people to be psychologically safe. So there's a lot of chatter around psychological safety at the moment and lots of different views around what it is and isn't. But there are some key things that are bubbling up in terms of key areas that you want to develop as a leader if you want to create a psychologically safe workplace. First and foremost is open, transparent communication. Now, this has to be two-way. If you want to create a psychologically safe workplace, communication needs to be flowing upwards and downwards. People need to be able to raise issues that are not working. But also leaders and senior leaders need to be able to communicate effectively with their teams, with their organization. So it's a dual directional communication, not a one-way communication. People need to have channels that they can go through to raise issues that are not comfortable. So particularly when we talk about psychological safety, people need to be able to know who do they go to if, let's say, their boss is not making them feel psychologically safe. Who do I go to next? Do I go to human resources? Do I go to a specific person in the organization? Do we have a channel that's really clear on where I go to if I need some support? We also need to have a real open, honest communication around well-being and where do I go if I need help with my well-being. So do you have an employee assistance program where people can go to get psychological counseling that we know is good and that is available to all of us in the workplace? Mental health, as As I've said before, mental health has become a bigger issue for us in organizations. We're seeing an escalation in mental health challenges globally. This is not located in one country, it's across the globe. And particularly over COVID, we saw an increase in challenges around social isolation. But coming out of COVID, we're also seeing ongoing challenges with mental health. And reality is that we need to get better at managing this. And our communication strategies in the organization need to provide for that open and transparent communication around the support that's in place for mental health and well-being. So when we talk about communication, it's both, can I get the help I need when I need it? So is there good EAP, or have I got someone internally I can go to? But also, if I'm having problems with my manager, where do I go to communicate those challenges? Or if I'm feeling unsafe in the workplace, where do I go to get help with that? So we need to have really open lines of communication. Hugely important aspect of psychological safety in the workplace. What's the communication upwards, downwards, around well-being, around where I go to get help? Also, if I go for help, am I going to be treated badly as a result? So people need to know that if they raise issues, that they're not going to be treated disrespectfully as a result, and that their information is confidential. Now, there have been some really horrible incidents recently globally around people raising issues and then being villainized as a result of that. That is not a psychologically safe workplace. If I raise an issue and I suddenly get treated differently because of raising issues or whistleblowing or whatever you want to call it, we have to protect people. If they're prepared to have the braveness to raise issues, we need to actually ensure that their confidentiality is maintained and that the issues that they raised are dealt with and dealt with promptly. So hugely important that all of those aspects of communication are well embedded in our organization. People have somewhere to go when they are feeling unsafe. They have somewhere to go when their well-being is challenged. That they have somewhere to go and they can communicate issues that are not comfortable in the workplace. But also that we are communicating the vision and the passion of the organization, and we're taking people and engaging them in the journey of the organization. So it's all those aspects of communication that need to be in place for a psychologically safe workplace. So that's one of the key aspects when we start to talk about psychological safety. The second key aspect that I want to chat about in terms of psychological safety is that we need to be developing and growing everyone in the organization to better understand their own impact on others. Because psychological safety isn't just our leaders' responsibility, it's all of our responsibility. So if I'm having a negative impact on someone in the team, I need to have developed the self-awareness to actually be able to respond to that and actually respond healthily. So when we talk about psychologically safe workplaces, all of us need to grow our self-awareness, our emotional intelligence, our resilience, and our ability to cope with interpersonal dynamics that don't always go right. Reality is that human beings do get into conflict. So we do need to develop people's capacity to deal with conflict, to build emotional intelligence, to build resilience on an ongoing basis. Again, one-off resilience training or one-off emotional intelligence training isn't going to hack it. We do need to grow people's ability to understand their impact. And I know we've got a lot of people saying, oh, we shouldn't expect people to be resilient. The organization should actually provide psychological safety. Yes, that is true. We can't rely on individuals' resilience, but if we can build everyone's resilience and everyone's emotional intelligence, then people are going to have they're less likely to have a negative impact on each other. We've got to build it at all layers. We can't just go, well, the organization needs to build the right culture. We all need to take responsibility for our own impact on culture, because all of us impact culture. If I walk into work and I'm all grumpy, I'm impacting negatively on the people around me. So it doesn't matter what job I do, I need to actually learn how to manage my impact on others. If I'm discriminatory towards someone else, doesn't matter what level of the organization I'm in, I'm going to have a negative impact and could potentially harm someone else in the workplace. So I need to do the work on my own internal processing so that I don't externalize my biases, my unconscious biases. So I need to develop my capacity to actually work effectively with other people. So I don't think we can get away from the need to constantly be building self-awareness, self-management, impact on others, understanding my resilience levels, understanding how constructive or destructive I am in my thinking. All those aspects of resilience are hugely important in building psychologically safe workplaces. My guidance to you, if you're a leader in your organization, if you're not building resilience, building emotional intelligence, building all of those aspects of healthy thinking into your daily repertoire of courses that you offer, you are not doing your job. Because everyone creates culture. We're all involved in creating culture, not one person. Yes, I know the leaders have a huge part to play in this, but it is all of us working more effectively together. So a key strategy in building a psychologically safe workplace is developing our internal ability to deal with each other. Developing relationships, understanding how we build and break trust, understanding what good customer service is internally as much as externally. In a lot of organizations, we focus predominantly on that external facing service. But actually, if we're not feeling psychologically safe, we're less able to deliver good customer service. So when we talk about psychologically safe workplaces, if we get it right, then we'll develop better capability to actually deliver good psychological safety to our customers. Yeah, if I'm not developing it internally, I'm not going to deliver it externally, and so my customer service is going to be impacted. Now, I work in a range of organizations, and I see the good, the bad, and the ugly in terms of culture. I can guarantee you that if you've got an unhealthy or toxic workplace, your customer service is not going to be good, because people cannot work in an unsafe, psychologically unsafe work environment and then go out and deliver good customer service. So you're actually undermining the fundamentals of your organization if you're not building your psychologically safe workplace. All right, so we've talked about communication, key. We've talked about developing resilience, developing the capability of our people to be more resilient, to be more emotionally intelligent, and to understand their impact. Those are two key strategies, key to delivering that psychologically safe workplace. So let's talk about the third aspect that I believe is fundamental to psychologically safe workplaces. And that is that we need to be growing our capacity as an organization to surface issues and deal with conflict effectively. And that needs to happen on a range of levels. So we need to build the capacity in our leadership team to effectively mediate conflict, and we need to develop the capacity to actually deal with conflict in the workplace. Conflict is a normal part of human interaction. We can't get away from that. We know that conflict occurs in our organizations. We know it occurs in our families at home. So we know that conflict is part of that human side of life. And so it's key that we develop the ability to deal with conflict and manage conflict. Now, there are lots of strategies, tools around the place that we can develop, but really important that we build that capacity into our organization. Not only do we want to develop people and build training programs that help people to deal with conflict, but we also want to have the capacity to mediate in our organization. It's really, really not healthy to always have to go external to get mediation. Sometimes it is necessary because maybe something's happened that we need external mediation, but we want to actually develop those skills internally. And mediation is a highly, highly sought after skill at the moment, purely because we're seeing conflict bubble up. Instead of running away from conflict, we need to help our leaders to face conflict and handle it and deal with it. Now, when we talk about mediation capability, that is developed both in a classroom and in the workplace. So actually getting comfortable bringing two people together who are in conflict and actually working through, allowing each of them to talk about their issues and then helping them to find an action outcome to their conflict. Those are skills that we want to develop in the workplace. And sometimes we build it into our culture coaching capability. Sometimes we build it into our leadership capability. Don't mind where it is, but you need to build that capability in your organization. But also the leadership team need to build their capability to deal with conflict in a leadership forum. I work with a number of organizations, and often the conflict is at a leadership level. If our leaders can't deal with conflict, how can we expect our staff to deal with conflict? We need to actually get comfortable confronting conflict and dealing with it professionally and respectfully. So that is our third aspect that's key to organizational culture and building the culture of psychological safety for everyone. Conflict isn't going to go away just because we work together. We need to build that capacity for our leaders to develop that capability. And for our staff. So we need our staff to be able to deal with conflict. Unfortunately, our schools are teaching that when there's conflict, you need to pull people apart and not let them talk about it. So we actually, in a work setting, need to re-engage people's understanding that dealing with conflict, we actually need people to sit down and actually learn how to work effectively together. It's no good allowing someone to go, oh, I can't work with that person because I don't like them. We might not like each other in a work setting, but we do have to work professionally together and build healthy relationships so that we can actually create a psychologically safe workplace. Hear me on this. This is not something that's easy, but we do need to build that capacity in our people. And it's not an easy thing. You can't build it in one day. You know, I hear of these conflict handling courses which are one day. This is built over a whole series of sessions. The first starting point is resilience and developing our resilience and our emotional intelligence. You need to build that over time. It doesn't happen in 5 minutes. Developing those skills is foundational. And once we've got those, then we can start to talk about conflict handling. I can't really get into conflict handling with someone if they don't understand the foundational aspects of emotional intelligence. Are they able to understand their impact on others? Are they able to actually deliver a shift in their behaviors so that they don't impact negatively? So foundationally, as I've already said, you need to build those capabilities and then develop capabilities around the ability to deal with conflict. Hugely important area. So we've got 3 aspects now that we're talking about for psychological safety. First of all, communication. Second of all, we want to build emotional intelligence, resilience, and those capabilities for all of us. Thirdly, we need to build our ability to manage conflict. But remember, underlying to all of this is that leadership capability. We've got to have leaders being measured. We've got to measure the culture. So let's talk about the 4th aspect that we want to be building in terms of the organization. So the 4th aspect that we want to be building for a psychologically safe organizational culture is we need to be able to build trust. Okay, big word. Yeah, trust's a huge word. We often throw it out. Oh, I do or I don't trust my leader, or I do or I don't trust other people in the team. Trust is a really hard thing to define, and we often only notice it when it's not there. Yeah, when it's there, we kind of just get on with it, and we know that we feel psychologically safe. We know that it's easy for relationships to build. But if we don't have trust, then suddenly things start to go wrong. I'm going to go behind someone's back because I don't trust that they'll hold confidentiality, or I go behind someone's back because I think they're playing games with me, or I go to someone else because I don't trust that my leader will do anything. Yeah. So trust is foundational to psychological safety. And Stephen Covey talks about one of the important aspects as a leader is to build trustworthiness. My job as a leader is to build trustworthiness. But I believe that if we're going to create truly psychologically safe workplaces, we all need to build our trustworthiness. All of us need to actually demonstrate good trustworthiness. And there's no place better to go than to look at some of the research that Brené Brown has done around trust and trustworthiness. And if you've never listened to her work around Braving, which is the acronym she uses for trust, it's worth a look at, and I would encourage you to go and look at it. But when we talk about in an organizational setting, what are we going to be doing to build trust? It is around starting to learn to surface things that are underneath the surface. Yeah. You know, those underlying comments that actually are getting in the way of our effectiveness. And we need to be able to surface those and actually openly talk about what's getting in the way. If we can't do that in our teams and in our organizations, we're not going to build trust, because it's all sitting below the surface and it's mucky and we don't talk about it. And so we avoid it and we keep avoiding it, and it keeps getting in the way. And so when we talk about building trust, it is that ability to surface emotional stuff that's getting in the way of effectiveness. Now, I don't mean that you need to talk about all your deepest, darkest secrets. That's not what we're talking about. I'm talking about, when in a team where someone's doing something that's actually impacting all of us negatively, we need to be able to have a safe enough environment to talk about that without denigrating that person and making them feel bad, being able to surface it so that we can actually deal with it and proactively respond in a way that's healthy. So our job as leaders and as team members in our organization is to get comfortable with bringing those to the surface. But that doesn't happen just One day I don't turn up at work and go, oh, I want to talk to this person about this issue. We have to build that capacity. So teams that spend time talking about emotional things that are getting in the way, teams that invest in building their team capability, doing personality diagnostics that help them to understand each other better, teams that actually take time out to talk about personal stuff that is actually affecting their work life. Talk about who they are as people, not just about what they do in terms of their job. So really important that we understand that teams that grow that capacity are building trust. They're building that capacity. If you can't do that, if you're not meeting as a team on a regular basis and building that capacity, you're not going to build trust. And individual trustworthiness starts to be eroded, as does trust. So when we talk about building trust, trust doesn't happen by oops. And you can't go, oh, I'm so trustworthy. No, you're not. We actually have to build that. And when we've eroded it, we have to honestly go, I'm really sorry, guys. I didn't mean to have that impact. I'd like to apologize to you, and I'm going to make it better, and I'm going to do it differently going forward. So when we talk about trust, trust takes effort on everyone's part. And we all need to work actively to build that. Some of the key things that we know help to build trust in a team are actually being clear about our roles and responsibilities and doing what we say we'll do. Having active opportunities to collaborate and build our capacity to understand each other. Doing things like team building activities. Actually making time to debrief on things that have gone right as well as those things that have gone wrong. Giving each other feedback and actually challenging things in the team. Those are the things that are going to help us to build trust. Trust does not develop in a vacuum. So we want to actively all be developing trust. And as an organization, we've developed a diagnostic around building trustworthiness, and we use that in teams to help us to understand how we each individually contribute to trust in a team. So hugely important that we actively developing trust in a team. And look, I do think that, some of the working from home is a challenge in this space. And I don't think we've got all the answers around what that looks like. But I can guarantee you that if all your team meetings are over Zoom or Teams, you're not fully developing trust. We do need that face-to-face element. I'm not saying you need it all the time, but you do need that face-to-face element. And I've seen that very starkly with a team that used to have a really good culture, and it's actually eroded massively because they just don't get together enough. They're only in the office a very small amount of time together, and it's just not effective. So they've eroded the trust in the team. That's eroded the culture. And in a recent culture review that we've done, the people are saying that it's toxic, it's not a good place to work. Now, what we do know from psychology and neuroscience is that human beings are wired for connection. We are wired to connect. And I don't care whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, you're still wired as a human being to connect. So when we start to talk about culture and organizational culture and psychological safety, connection matters. So how do we create the right level of connection and the right level of connectivity that allows us to create a psychologically safe workplace? Hugely important. And as I say, I don't think we've got all the answers. What I am seeing though is that you need to have some level of face-to-face connection. If you're talking about, teams that you just want to have a quick catch up on some of the deliverables, that works on Teams or Zoom or whatever WebEx whatever platform you work on, but it's not enough. We do need to connect. We do need to come together and have that dialogue and that connectivity. So I encourage you, if you want to really create a trusting, psychologically safe workplace, you're going to have to provide for some level of connection. Again, that can be challenging if you're working across the globe. I've spent a large chunk of my career working in organizations that have a global footprint, and that can be super challenging. I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm just saying that if you want to create true trusting relationships, you need to invest in that connectivity, and that is some level of face-to-face. So if you find yourself in a face-to-face opportunity, then really making use of that to deal with the interrelationships. And forget about the tactical work stuff. You can do that on Zoom. Really making the best use of that time. So when we start to talk about psychologically safe workplaces, I can't get away from the need for some level of face-to-face interaction. You need to work out what the best is for your team. If you've got a global footprint, then you're going to have to think about how you navigate that so that people aren't sitting on aeroplanes 24/7. But you do need to find those interaction and those touch points where you can connect. So I want to summarize the key aspects of psychologically safe workplaces. So first of all, you need to be measuring your culture. You need to measure it on an ongoing basis. Whatever measurement tool you're using, you need to check that it is measuring both climate and culture. We want to measure both so that we know that we're getting good results. We want to know that we are actually measuring the surface stuff, but also that underlying stuff that can get in the way of effective culture. And then we need to be measuring our leaders and growing our leadership capability. So our leaders are key in psychological safety. They're not everything, but they are key to psychologically safe workplaces. So we need to measure them on a regular basis through 360s, give them feedback, and work closely with them to develop a change program that they are going to work to and deliver change in their leadership profile. When you talk about your organizational culture surveys or the culture surveys that you're running, those also provide leaders with areas to work on. And from their culture survey, they should be developing a team action plan that's going to allow them to implement cultural change in their teams. So leaders need both measurement and development. So that's the starting point of psychologically safe cultures. The next area, and this is across the organization, the 4 areas that we want to build is we want to have a good communication strategy. Upwards, downwards, sideways. We need to be able to allow people to communicate the things that are not going well and have good strategies for escalating things. We need to actually communicate with people on a one-on-one basis to understand their well-being, how they're looking after it, and provide employee assistance in that space. The second aspect that we need to be growing and developing is we need to be building resilience, and we need to be developing emotional intelligence across the organization, whether that's in teams or individuals. I don't care how you're doing it, you need to be growing that capability. The third aspect that's key, and look, I am honing in on 4 aspects. There are a lot of other ones, but the third aspect is we need to build the capacity to deal with conflict. Conflict's a part of human interaction, but we need to be able to deal with it, raise it to the surface, deal with it, and help people to work on how they cope with conflict. And the fourth one is that building of trust. So if you want a psychologically safe workplace, if you start with those 6 areas, your measurement, your development of your leaders, your development of good communication strategies, your development of your people on a range of areas, you will start to really enhance that psychological safety. But at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, we all need to help to build that psychologically safe workplace. The impact I have on you and the impact you have on me plays a part in good psychologically safe workplaces. We all need to come together to create them. We need to create these environments which help us to be the best that we can be. I see too many workplaces where individuals are denigrated or put down and actually damaged by cultures that are not healthy. And we want to actually change that. I'd like to see 10 years from now that we can actually start to talk about, hey, these are great evidence of psychologically safe workplaces where people want to work and are engaged to work. I'd like to see more of those. There are some great examples already across the globe, but unfortunately we see too many of the ones that aren't psychologically safe. We've seen lots of examples of those hit the press in recent times, and really it's time that we stop that. But my guidance to you, if you're a leader of an organization, get focused on building culture. Stop wasting time on worrying about whether the technical aspects of your business are working well. Those your people will develop. If you create the right culture, they'll do the technical stuff that you need done. Build the right culture and you'll grow people and they'll be able to do the work that needs to be done and do it well. And they'll do it in a way that is building your customer base and building the capacity of your organization. Don't build culture and you're actually damaging your organization. You're damaging the organization's capacity to actually deliver outcomes. We've known for years that good cultures bring better results. In fact, the research says about 30 to 40% uplift in organizational outcomes is the result of good culture. So why not invest in culture and invest in building those psychologically safe workplaces? And thank you for listening, and I hope you've taken something away from this.